Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Insights and Interviews. I'm your host, Alex Hazard. The interview was pre recorded, but I sat down just this afternoon with Major General Greg Anderson at Fort Drum. I think you'll enjoy the interview. But first, we want to thank our sponsors, National Grid and Advocate Drum. Take a look. Major General, first, I just always like to say what an honor it is to sit down with folks like yourself, and thank you for taking the time for this, and thank you for your service.
Oh, Alex, I'm very happy to do it. It's been a great life. So I'm happy to speak to y'all today.
Well, we kind of always like to start these interviews out. We see you talking on the news all the time of things going on at Fort Drum, but we want to get to know you a little bit. So we all have a life story to share. Would you share a little bit of yours with us?
So I was born and raised in San Jose, California, before it became Silicon Valley, California. It was there was farmland, orchards, vineyards, and I used to walk through grade school all the way kind of till through middle school. Then Silicon Valley transformed overnight. You got to see that, but it was a wonderful place to grow up. Had a great family, and that was my upbringing. And then we went to. Then I joined the Army when I was 17 in the reserves. Went to basic training, and got my first taste of what it's like to be Private Anderson back in those days. And then from there, I went off to the military academy and sought commission service. I always wanted to be a soldier. That was kind of my calling. There's really not a whole lot of service in my family up until me, and now there's a ton of it. It's been a great life. I met my wife Lou Zane in Seattle, Washington, when I was assigned to the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and we've been married for 26 years now. 3 sons. Two of my sons are at the military academy at West Point, and my other son just shipped off to become a cryptologic linguist. He's going to take Mandarin at the Defense Language Institute.
Wow.
And he's pursuing foreign service, and this is a step on that path. So that's kind of our family. This is our 3rd time up here in the North Country, and we love it up here. Lou and I were thrilled to find out we were coming back to Fort Drum and to the Army. We had been on a way and sequestered by the joint force, both at Central Command and Africa Command, before coming back to Drum. And so again, we're thrilled to be back, Alex.
Well, we're thrilled that you're there, and I can see why you love Fort Drum. It's a wonderful place. Speaking of that, you're leading one of the most deployed divisions. How do you ensure that 10th Mountain Division soldiers are trained and really prepared to deploy at a moment's notice? I mean, they can say it and then they're on the plane.
Yeah, so it is a challenge, and it's a good question. And we've been doing this for decades now up here at Fort Drum. Really, since the first unit to hit into Afghanistan, and right after 9/11 was 1st Battalion, 87th Infantry out of Fort Drum. And then 431 here out of Fort Drum closed down Afghanistan there, along with with some of the force they brought in to close down HKIA and their embassy. So beginning to end, and even now with the deployments with ISIS, and some of you may have heard recently, the division headquarters is going to the Yukon Theater of Operations to support our assurance mission over there in Europe. And it is a busy place, and there's a lot of work for us. First, I think one of the advantages the 10th Mountain gives us is we are light. We are a light infantry formation. So we can go places quickly without a lot of logistical tail. And so even dating back to the 90s, the division in its current form was formed in 1985 here. But since then, in the 90s, we were the most deployed unit in the Army. And then that shifted right into the global war on terrorism, continued op tempo. And now here, I mean, we're just a trained, tough, self-reliant and light force. We can go places quickly, easily, and solve problems because of the nature of how we train our people here. So that's where we're a huge advantage to the Army. And this environment up here helps us. It gets to the training piece here, Alex. The environment up here at Fort Drum is very conducive to training light infantry formations, small units that can operate off of lines of communication, decentralized, led by junior leaders, not
Yeah.
in an overly centralized manner, but out there solving problems on their own. I mean, being in a tough environment creates self-reliance, self-resourcefulness, and that's kind of, we take advantage of that and we train that into our formations. And so that's the philosophical approach to how we do it, and then why the Army sees so much value in the division. And you know, all divisions are important, but when you just look at deployment records and op tempo, you get to see the Army who one of their go-to units are.
So shifting gears here a little bit, full-scale combat operations against near-peer competitors radically different from the counterinsurgency operations the Army has supported for the past 20 years. Where will the 10th Mountain Division fit into the future of combat operations, and how has the division training focus changed in terms of preparing for the next war or deployment?
Yeah, okay, great. That's a really important question, and the Army has come up with this 2030 strategy right now, and to kind of address, the future of war and future of what the Army's role in the war, and center to this is this idea of multi-domain operations. And so you think of, I mean, kind of everyone's familiar with the basic domains of land, air, and sea, right? But now you add other domains. There's a cyber domain. Space is now an area we play in. And, there used to be an information domain, but I think it's been encapsulated now into cyber and the information side. And so you're competing against opponents or opponents,
Mhm.
non-state actors, state actors, peer competitors, or others across multiple domains. But one thing that, and the nature of war that won't change, is we try to think about how we're going to fight, is the need to hold, or to take ground and to hold ground. I mean, that is central to war. People live on the ground and on the land, and they're therefore a credible land force that can bring the conflict to a conclusion in a decisive way is going to happen on the land. And that, therefore, I say that up front because there will always be a need for infantry formations in our Army, and light infantry at that. And so as we look into the future, how am I trying to train 10th Mountain to fight in a multi-domain conflict? First one is developing our junior leaders, developing light
Yeah.
infantry formation, squad leaders, platoon leaders, captains, non-commissioned officers, to be able to sense and see their environment, be connected to information and precision weapons, and to be able to make calls rapidly while not tied or fixed to infrastructure or lines of communication. That's the advantage we can bring the force. The Army's got other forces to do other things, but they're asking us
Right.
to take kind of part in that piece. It's the modern battlefield, given the speed of information, the range and lethality of precision weapon systems, that coupled with space, cyber, drones, I mean, electronic warfare. There's all kinds of things that are going to force us to operate in what we call a discontiguous, disconnected manner. So you're not going to have a clear, beautiful line, us on this side, the enemy on that side. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's all kind of intermingled, and light infantry is tailor made for that kind of fighting. And so, but you got to train that and really focus on junior leader development. That's a hallmark here in the division. Tough, self-reliant junior leaders NCOs that own this division and
Yeah.
can employ the technical means of violence faster and better than anybody. I, Alex, I have three enduring priorities for the division here. One is to build teams at all levels, teams that are committed to each other, that trust each other, that know each other, that are familiar with each other. Two is to master the basic skills, to do your tasks, your roles, and your missions without conscious thought. If you can do that and you're part of a team, you're going to be fine. And lastly, is leaders at all levels that can critically think, not regurgitate, not recite, not memorize, but actually think and solve problems on their own as part of a team that can then master basic skills. You'll see we can outthink and outperform an enemy when you hit on those three enduring priorities. And that's the idea. So sorry to be long-winded. I'm
No.
obviously passionate about this topic.
Now, kind of on that topic, divisions are now the war fighting formation instead of brigade combat teams. It's been a long time since any installation deployed an entire division. You've shared with us how you're preparing the division for these types of deployments, but can you share with our audience what our communities can do to prepare for such an event?
First, I'll tell you right now, Fort Drum is a what we call a power projection platform between Wheeler Sac Army Airfield, our rail yards here, and all the infrastructure here to help us move men, weapons, and equipment rapidly. We're doing it now. This month, I mean, it's happening right now at Fort Drum.
Sure.
Just here's a snapshot of what's happening for everyone out there. You've got our Combat Aviation Brigade is deploying to the National Training Center. I think they had about 250, 300 vehicles and trailers that they loaded up last week, even during the snowstorm. Followed by our second brigade has got 2,400 vehicles that are being loaded up, that are being inspected this week and loaded up next week on rail to go to Fort Polk for their training. So there's two brigades outloading in in about a 2-week period. This is, and on top of that, as you know, the division just got orders to deploy to EUCOM. We are getting the equipment for that mission is being prepared and inspected and readied for movement this week as well. And lastly, our first brigade just got back from Central Command, the Middle East, and all the people are back, but their materials and their vehicles and equipment is now starting to come in as well. So all this is happening. It's about a division minus worth of combat power is moving or coming back. And Fort Drum and the people here that run this installation and our civilian employees who are the experts at the rail load and the inspection yards and getting their vehicles fleets ready, they are absolutely instrumental, and I couldn't be more grateful or impressed by how they're handling it. And oh, by the way, they're doing it in the snowstorms, cold temperatures, and they're just doing it magnificently. So that's huge. The other thing, the installation of the employees here and the civilians that live out in the surrounding areas of North Country, our families, and our soldiers here. We are grateful for what this community does to enable our readiness. You protect us. You protect us with police and fire and firefighting and really, really good infrastructure around the surrounding areas. Our kids get to go to great schools here, taught by exceptional teachers and administrators and coaches. I mean, it's awesome. Hospitals here are caring for. We don't have a hospital at Fort Drum, so we're reliant on the local hospitals across the North Country to care for our families. We can't house everybody here, and so there are from housing opportunities and the rentals and other. The communities welcome our families and soldiers into there and make them part of their own. All this enables us to do what I just described. We can train, focus, develop, and move now and we have a saying in the Army, I don't have to check my six, meaning I don't have to look back behind me and make sure everything's taken care of. Our our North Country neighbors and community members are helping us. So, anyways, thanks for asking that. It's an opportunity for me to thank everybody. I'm really grateful for that.
Well, shifting gears again here, and you spoke a little bit about light infantry, but what lessons have come out of specifically the war in Ukraine that influence the employment and effectiveness of that light infantry?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're seeing lots of lessons learned. This is on open source. You can look a lot of this stuff up.
Sure.
The Russians went in on a vehicle heavy kind of design, and they tried to fight the first year of that war, mainly from tanks and mechanized vehicles and armored personnel carriers, artillery, fires, things like that. They were road bound for the most part, and the Ukrainians took advantage of Russian limitations of getting off the roads and just got into the woods, got into the hills, got into the stream beds, and they fought like lions out there, and I'm just really impressed in watching light infantry take on vehicular mobile formations and defeat them. And the war's got a long ways to go, but the lessons, watching Ukrainian forces fight like lions out there, as I said, we've learned a lot, and everybody's learning actually from that lesson. And so, like I said, the light infantry, the role it will play in combat is, if anything, is even more important, not less important, as some experts have kind of said. You see tough infantry that can get anywhere in the terrain will always be needed in modern warfare period.
When we talk about all of the challenges that soldiers have, it's a long list. So I am curious to know, what are some of the top challenges that soldiers and their families, both young and new soldiers and seasoned soldiers, leading your formations at the battalion and brigade levels are facing?
Yeah, Alex. So this is a big one, and we spent a lot of time on this one. We got a whole line of effort of our campaign plan devoted to making sure we can address some of these challenges. First of all, we ask an amazing amount of our people, which includes our families. So we ask our soldiers and our families to pack up and move every few years to a new environment, places they're unfamiliar, become part of a unit and a community that they're unsure of, and then to also train and prepare themselves for uncertainty and for potential danger, and to defend and to defend our nation and to fight and win our wars. So we're asking our soldiers to do that, and their families are linked and part of that, inextricably linked. And so that in itself is a pretty amazing challenge, because when you think of, most of our soldiers are young adults, and their families are young families. And so they're going through this. And we have got to recognize the importance of a couple things. First of all, balance in training and balance in their ability to live life and be with their
Right.
family and attend
Important.
sporting events and go to graduations and go to recitals and all the things that are important, or do things, key family. So we're very, very attuned to making sure we can do that too. We've got to give them some predictability. People don't want to live, with the degree of uncertainty and not knowing what they'll be doing here in a day, or the next day, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. So
Mhm.
we owe it to them to give them a chance to have, balance and live life while they serve, and make things as predictable as possible in a tough business. And we owe them the best infrastructure, health, and a safe environment. And that's the stuff that we've got to provide to help our young soldiers and families, and to our old ones as well, uh,
Right.
um, commit to serving. And when they know that, again, when we've got their back and their families are cared for, you'll see commitment in the formation, and that gets this teamwork and cohesion and trust that we need. And that's why with the North Country, everything that the communities do for us here at Drum and the people up here really helps that, and we're grateful for it. So yeah, I'd say one more other thing on that. I let point off on the
Of course.
sometimes our families uh, employment opportunities for them too. So they're moving around. It's hard to get into a line of work or a profession when you don't have a stable platform. And so there is a, I call it a legion of talent here at Fort Drum in our military spouses, many of whom desire to work too, and that's a need that we're working with the community on because it's an untapped resource up here. Not just it benefits us, it'll benefit the North Country for sure too. So, anyways, thanks for that question.
Of course. Well, sometimes when you're driving to Watertown, or I live in Clayton, from Watertown to Clayton, you'll be on Route 12 and you see uh, the soldiers training on the side of the road. So we know physical fitness has always been critical to building a strong, agile, and effective army. But how significant is this training element for the 10th Mountain Division soldier, particularly, now in the winter?
Yeah, right. No, so it's probably the most important thing we do each day is the physical fitness aspect. There's a lot of things that the Army asks its soldiers, but the most important thing we do every day here at the 10th Mountain is physical fitness, whether we're in an exercise and training and the physicality involved with that, or whether we're actually doing, a workout and actually, building up fitness. There is a culture of fitness up here, for sure, and that's one of the strengths of the 10th Mountain Division. The Army has blessed us with and Congress have blessed us with a lot of great resources here on the gyms, the training facilities, and all that. And we want fit soldiers, but we need physically tough soldiers. So I would pass to my commanders the importance of having physical fitness and physical toughness. So you see folks out in the elements, in the snow or the temperatures on snowshoes, or whether you see them running obstacle courses or long ruck marches or out there in the woods. These are things that build toughness. Then we have these facilities where they can work, cardio and muscular development and stretch and all of that matters. And so we spend a lot of time focused on that because we know ultimately in the end, light infantry is a physical endeavor. And you've got to have fitness, but you've got to have a degree of physical toughness and confidence to kind of get through everything that the light infantry has to do to be successful in the battlefield.
We've heard you talk about this with kind of calling it the Alpine warrior culture. How is that? How is that changing how 10th Mountain Division soldiers train?
So that's our roots, right? Our
Right.
roots are mountain and alpine fighting, dating back to the inception of the division in 1943. We went away from that um, during the global war on terror, when really, you couldn't. All the brigades and most units were essentially equipped and trained the same way for the same mission or a very similar mission, whether you're in Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, with those conflicts past us, we're moving towards these large scale combat operations in any environment. We can't predict the environment. There
Right.
needs to be a unit that's capable of fighting in the mountains, fighting in alpine terrain, fighting in cold weather, Nordic type conditions. And we are getting back to those roots, both in terms of the schools we send people to, the equipping. There's an equipping aspect to it. We're looking to partner with some of our newest NATO allies, the Finns and the Swedes, and start sharing practices and training techniques and how we tactics just to kind of build our ability to get back into there after not really having trained it much for a couple decades now.
How are your leaders, commanders, and NCOs alike being empowered and empowering subordinates to become more innovative, more self-reliant, comfortable with taking prudent and calculated risks? I know that they're always ready at a moment's notice, but there's some risk involved here.
Yeah, you got to train people to do that, right? So
Sure.
somebody doesn't come in and solve problems for you right away, and and younger people don't necessarily have a full appreciation of how to measure risk, or take risk, or even understand risk. A lot of that comes from seasoning and experience, and so to me, there's no magic moment in creating an NCO corps that's empowered. In fact, I don't even like to use the word empowered. NCO Corps that owns operations up here and owns our unit. There's no magic moment in taking junior officers and so before they can think and solve problems and manage risk at the lowest level. This takes a lot of engagement by senior leaders, sergeant majors, colonels, and other mentors and stuff. And it also, we've got to learn to delegate and empower, or, to delegate that sort of problem solving in normal day-to-day business. If they can solve problems in the barracks and the motor pools and the rifle ranges and in the gyms and during training exercises here, and they own it, you'll start building that kind of that tissue there, and that confidence there that's going to just enable an entire formation to do it. There's some risk associated with that, though, right? They're 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 young. They're going to make mistakes, and we've got to underwrite that risk and mistakes by helping them and coaching them and helping them grow from that. So that's kind of, we're actually discussing this a lot these days up here in the division. It's something that's important to us, and a lot of thought and thinking are going on. For some people, they're ready. Some people, it's going to be a leap of faith. That's okay. Everybody's a little built a little differently on that.
We spoke about this a little bit earlier about kind of giving soldiers some predictability and giving them balance in their lives. But we know that recruitment remains a serious challenge for the Army. So what's happening both nationally and here locally to address the recruiting shortfalls? And how does the 10th Mountain Division fit into this nationwide endeavor? Is it a problem here in the North Country?
Yeah, our Army, this for the Army, the institution at large, this is its number one priority. Now, it's built to fight winter wars, but it realizes that we haven't met our recruiting goals for 3 consecutive years now, and so the Army has asked us to partner closely with the recruiting command. And so for the 10th Mountain Division, it's up here. Our 1st Recruiting Brigade runs the East Coast and the Middle Atlantic states, really from Maine all the way down to Virginia. And we partner with them in their efforts, not necessarily to recruit. We're not recruiting for the Army, but we're helping by connecting the Army to our people, so that they can see the Army, they can talk to soldiers, they can share experiences. Here's something, you may have heard me say this before, but of last year's recruiting class, which was under mission, we did not meet mission. And the mission 65,000 new soldiers every year out of a population of around 330 million. It's kind of a modest goal, and we still had trouble meeting. But here's the alarming piece of that, Alex. Of the class that came in, 83% of them had ties to family members that were in the military. So they had a connection. They had literally family connection.
Sure. Yeah.
Of the remaining 17%, and this is anecdotal just because I could see it in observation, I observed my formations. A big chunk of that 17% are immigrants that also come in, our newest Americans. So you got ones tied to the military through family, and others that are seeking to become citizens through service. That means we're there's a, there's an importance to connect to the people, and that's where we spend a lot of our time and a lot of our effort and energy on that. And so I I appreciate what the communities up here are doing to allow us to connect to them, and we want to bring them here to strengthen that connection.
Well, I would imagine, and I would think probably playing a big role in that, but I'll ask you that included in the adoption of the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act was a requirement that all the services, including the Army, provide paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers, giving the military branches until the end of December to implement this change in policy. So, how do you see this new family benefit impacting recruitment, retention, quality of life, soldier readiness, and unit deployability?
Well, anytime anytime like you talked about, I think one of the earlier questions we talked about the importance of challenges families have.
Yeah.
This
Hmm.
this gives a measure of balance back to families and a bit of predictability back to families, especially during a transition. So think of young families away from their social networks, right? So if
Yeah.
an 18 or 20-year-old soldier gets married and they have a children and they're 1,000 miles away from their home base where their grandparents are and uncles and aunts and all that, you know, helping these families out any way we can to establish it with obviously the addition of children is huge. So we're happy. This will make us better without question.
So you've mentioned that you have a love for Fort Drum and that you've been here before. This is your third assignment to Fort Drum, which gives you and your family kind of a unique perspective on the division and North Country community. So, what advice do you have for our community members on we can enhance the Army's mission as well as the soldier and family's experience here in the North Country?
Keep doing what you're doing, team, please. And I know you know, in, I mean, you're doing so much. It's hard for me to say what can you do to improve. I mean, like I said, from the schools to the protection to the to the hospital care to the sports teams and things you do to take care of our kids and families to all the employees that live in the North Country that work here and take care of Fort Drum. I mean, it's awesome. On the and then how you avail your resources and all the activities up here, whether it's out there in the Tug Hill region, the Adirondacks, up in the St. Lawrence and River and Lake Ontario, or to all the little communities and things there are to do around here. Keep doing what you're doing. We are home. There's no other. People have heard me say this before too. There's no other relationship between an installation and its surrounding community that's better than what we have up here. But I'm not even close, and I've been around. So it's a treasure for the Army, and we're grateful to be neighbors and to serve our North Country.
Well, we are grateful for you. We're grateful for your time. Thank you for your leadership throughout your career, and especially right now at Fort Drum. And thanks for your time today.
Awesome, man. Take care, Alex. Cheers.